Grandpa Ned had always said that the measure of a man wasn't in what he owned, but in what he was willing to give up. I never understood what he meant, until the day my son found me stepping out of a yellow taxi instead of the gleaming BMW he'd given me for my 60th birthday. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway as I paid the taxi driver and gathered my grocery bags. I was fumbling with the paper sacks when I heard the familiar rumble of Jake's pickup truck pulling in behind the cab. "Dad, why did you come by taxi? What happened to the BMW I gave you?" My son's voice carried equal parts confusion and concern. He jumped out of his truck, his work boots crunching on the gravel, his face creased with worry. At 32, Jake had inherited his mother's kind eyes and thankfully my father's wisdom, though he didn't know it yet. I smiled, setting down the groceries on the porch steps. "The car's fine, son, running beautifully, actually." "Then why?" he gestured at the departing taxi, its brake lights flashing red before it turned onto the main road. "Why are you taking cabs? Are you having trouble driving? Is it your eyes? We can get you to a doctor." "Jake," I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension there. "Come inside. I'll make us some coffee and I'll tell you about your great-grandfather Ned." We settled into the worn leather chairs in my study, the same chairs where I'd read Jake bedtime stories when he was small, where we'd had the talk about college, where I'd shown him his mother's favorite photographs after she passed. The evening light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "You never talk about Grandpa Ned," Jake said, cradling his coffee mug. "I should have told you this story years ago," I admitted, "but some lessons only make sense when you're ready to hear them." I took a sip of coffee, gathering the threads of a memory from 40 years past. The story of Grandpa Ned. I was about your age when it happened, maybe a year or two younger. I just made junior partner at the firm, bought my first real house, and felt like I was finally becoming the man I'd always wanted to be. Grandpa Ned was 73 then, living alone in that old craftsman house on Maple Street. You remember it, the one with the wraparound porch. He'd been a machinist his whole life, worked with his hands, saved every penny, never owned anything fancy, but he had this beautiful 1967 Mustang, forest green, chrome that sparkled like diamonds. He'd bought it new, maintained it himself, and it was his pride and joy. That car was the only extravagance he'd ever allowed himself. One Saturday, I stopped by to mow his lawn. He was getting too old to handle the push mower, though he'd never admit it. I found him in the garage, running a chamois cloth over the Mustang's hood, the same ritual I'd watched him perform 1,000 times. "She's a beauty," I said, and he grinned that crooked smile of his. "Best thing I ever bought," he replied, "besides your grandmother's engagement ring, of course." A week later, I got a call from Mrs. Henderson, his neighbor. "Your grandfather just sold his car," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Sold it to some young fellow for half what it's worth. I think something might be wrong with him, you know, mentally. People his age sometimes." I drove over immediately, my mind racing with possibilities. Dementia? A scam artist taking advantage of him? When I arrived, Grandpa Ned was on the porch, looking perfectly content, drinking lemonade like it was any other Tuesday afternoon. "Mrs. Henderson called me," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "She said you sold the Mustang." "I did." He gestured to the empty spot in the driveway where the car had always sat. "Why did you need money? Why didn't you call me? I would have." He held up a hand, stopping my flood of questions. "Sit down, boy." I sat. "You know the Martins, 3 houses down?" he asked. I nodded. The Martins, young family, 3 kids, constantly struggling. Tom Martin had been laid off from the factory 6 months prior. Their daughter Sarah, she's smart as a whip, got herself a full scholarship to State University, full ride, everything paid for, but it's 40 miles away and they don't have a reliable car. Tom's old sedan barely makes it to the grocery store and back. Sarah was going to turn down the scholarship because they couldn't figure out how to get her there and back, how she'd get to her work-study job, how she'd come home for holidays. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Grandpa," I gave them the Mustang, he said simply. Gave it, not sold it. Mrs. Henderson got that part wrong. I think her hearing aid needs adjusting. Told them it was an early graduation present for Sarah. But that car meant everything to you. You've had it for 24 years, 3 months, and 16 days, he said, his eyes twinkling. I know exactly how long I had her. And you know what? Every single one of those days she was mine to enjoy. But enjoyment isn't the same as purpose, son. That car sitting in my garage, being polished and admired, that was enjoyment. That car taking a bright young woman to college, helping her build a future, maybe carrying her home when she comes back a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher. That's purpose. I was quiet for a long time. Finally, I asked, how are you going to get around? He shrugged. I've got 2 good legs for short distances, the bus line for medium ones, and a telephone to call a cab for everything else. I've got my health, this house, more food than I can eat, and money enough in the bank. What do I need that I don't have? But you loved that car. I do, but I love what it's doing now even more. He leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. Listen to me, because this is important. There are 2 kinds of wealth in this world. There's the wealth you keep, the things you hold onto, protect, polish, and store away. Then there's the wealth you give, the things you release into the world to do good, to grow, to multiply into something bigger than what you alone could create. The first kind of wealth, he continued, it dies with you. The car rusts, the house crumbles, the money gets spent by people who didn't earn it and don't appreciate it. But the second kind, that lives forever. Sarah will remember that car every day of her life. When she's treating patients or teaching children or whatever she ends up doing, she'll remember that someone believed in her enough to give her a chance. And maybe, just maybe, when she's got something someone else needs, she'll remember to pass it on. I visited Grandpa Ned every week after that. I watched him walk to the corner store, saw him wait for buses, called cabs for him when the weather was bad. He never complained, not once. And you know what? I saw him at Sarah's graduation 4 years later. She found him in the crowd, threw her arms around him and cried. Her parents cried. Hell, I cried. She's a pediatrician now, running a clinic in a low-income neighborhood, treating kids whose families can't always pay. The Mustang, Sarah's younger brother drives it now. He uses it to deliver meals to shut-ins. The car Grandpa Ned loved is still doing good in the world, still serving purpose over mere possession. Jake hadn't touched his coffee in 15 minutes. It sat cooling in his hands as he stared at me with something I couldn't quite read in his eyes. The BMW, he said slowly. What did you do with it? There's a veteran in town, Marcus Webb. You might not know him. He came back from overseas with injuries that make it hard for him to work regular hours, but he's been trying to start a business doing handyman work. Good man, skilled, honest. But he's been riding the bus to jobs, carrying his tools in a backpack and a rolling cart. It limits how far he can go, how many jobs he can take, how much equipment he can transport. You gave him the BMW. I did. It's got a big trunk, reliable engine, good gas mileage. It'll help him build his business, support his family. And son, I've got your mother's old sedan, runs perfectly fine. I don't need 2 cars. Most days, I don't even need one. Jake set down his coffee and walked to the window, his back to me. I could see his shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths. I saved for 2 years to buy you that car, he said quietly. I wanted to give you something nice, something that showed how much I appreciated everything you'd done for me. I know you did, and I appreciated it more than you'll ever know. Then how could you just give it away? I stood and walked to stand beside him. Outside, the streetlights were beginning to flicker on, illuminating the neighborhood where I'd raised my son, where his mother and I had built our life. The car showed me exactly how much you appreciate me, I said, but keeping it wouldn't have honored that sacrifice, it would have wasted it. You gave me that gift from a generous heart. The most respectful thing I could do was to let that generosity ripple outward. Jake turned to face me, and I saw tears on his cheeks. Grandpa Ned taught me that wealth isn't meant to be a dead end, I continued. It's meant to be a river, flowing from person to person, carrying life wherever it goes. You worked hard, saved carefully, and gave generously. I received gratefully and gave forward. Marcus will work hard, build his business, and hopefully one day he'll pass that generosity on to someone else who needs it. I just wanted you to have something nice, Jake whispered. I do have something nice. I have you, a son who loves his father enough to sacrifice for him. I have my health, my home, my memories of your mother. I have enough. And because I have enough, I can give. That's the real luxury, son, not having giving. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then Jake pulled me into a hug, holding tight the way he used to when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. I'm proud of you, Dad, he said into my shoulder. I'm proud of you too. You gave me the means to help someone, and that's a greater gift than any car could ever be. Epilogue. That was 3 years ago. Last week, Jake called me to say he'd been promoted to regional manager, a position that came with a significant raise. I've been thinking, he said, about Grandpa Ned, about purpose versus possession. I want to talk to you about setting up a scholarship fund. I smiled into the phone. Your great-grandfather would have loved that. What should we call it? I thought about the forest green Mustang, about the BMW that now bore the logo of Webb's Handyman Services, about all the ways that love multiplies when we let it flow. Call it the River Fund, I said, because wealth should flow. Through my study window, I watched a taxi pull up to take me to my doctor's appointment. I grabbed my jacket, picked up my keys to the sedan that runs just fine, and headed out the door. Grandpa Ned was right. The measure of a man isn't what he owns. It's what he's willing to give away.